I actually think the M&A environment, as it relates to Japan, is a tale of two cities. In Japan and outside Japan. Outside Japan, I really do think it's a golden opportunity. As you know, people around here, some of whom have been friends and clients from the past, just a couple of years ago, things have changed dramatically. You move from auctions to negotiated deals. You move from a landscape dominated by PE firms to that where the only people around are really strategics. And you've, in terms of the key characteristics of the deal, you move from price to certainty of closing. Now, all of those shifts benefit the Japanese. Second, you might say, well, yeah, but did the window close already? There really were three phases. There was the phase right up to last summer where it was still tough for the Japanese to compete in that very auction-like environment. Then from last summer to December, before the financial crunch really seemed to hit the Japanese, where some of the Japanese financial firms and others really did step up. And then now. So, you know, the window, my answer to that would be that the window's not closed. On a relative basis, the Japanese firms are still better off. The financial institutions have been impacted clearly, but while the Japanese financial institutions may not be as good shape as the Canadian banks, they're certainly far better off than many of the US and the Europeans. And I think it still provides unique opportunities. It's going to be for the foreseeable future. More Japanese will buy companies out of Chapter 11. Japanese companies have been the stalking horse. They'll continue to be. And not only will it be good for them, but people will reach out and know the Japanese understand it and know how to do it. And I predict this year you're going to see, and the next year, more Japanese using their equity. And that's something we haven't seen. If you remember back in the 80s when Kyocera bought AVX, and people said, wow, this is going to happen. And you guys led the way with, you have GCA and Savvian. But there are plenty of opportunities where companies, frankly, you might look at it as a good portfolio of businesses, but they have upside-down capital structures. It's too much debt. What do? Frankly, you need somebody, the deal has to be done for equity, not for debt. And there's no reason why the Japanese couldn't play in that role. That's the tale of the city overseas. Domestically, I don't need to tell you that it's a very different situation. There's no growth, there's declining population, and everyone talks, as they do here, about massive restructuring. In this case, it's not led by the major banks, it's led by the big blue chip electronic companies and others. There's an awful strong feel of Tokyo and government to all of that. I think there is a different window if you go to companies in Osaka or Kyoto, which are far more entrepreneurial, but that may preoccupy companies for quite some time. In terms of the major impediments to, I think, success, clearly number one is fear. Okay, and fear could be translated into abundance of caution. You know, memories of the lost decade are still very fresh with people. You know, avoid making a mistake rather than take a chance and be successful. The second is going to be on financing. You know, the Japanese financial institutions hopefully will be recapitalizing themselves, but right now it is much more selective. It's not open for everyone. But I think the final point, and I want to make a few more comments on this one, really goes to the social factors and leadership. I think one of the key assets going forward the Japanese will be investing in will be the personnel over here and elsewhere. You know, and one of their key challenges will be integrating that personnel with the Japanese personnel around the world. Why do I say that? Well, very simply, over the next 5, 10, 20 years, the growth is all overseas. It's not in Japan. So as Japanese companies become 20, 25, one-third of their operations overseas, are they really a Japanese company? Or do they have their Japanese origins and they'll have a certain Japanese culture, but they're really a global factor and they want to attract all people. If you look at the rise of already some major companies, Japanese companies in the U.S., and you see that their U.S. subsidiaries are now the training grounds for future leadership. So what is that leadership? Well, I'm not going to be bold, but my colleagues like to say I like to nudge people. The first thing is humility. And that is the patient know thyself. What are you good at, but what are you not good at? And be honest about it, because you can't be all things to all people. Second is to be wise and to chart that course which builds on your strengths. And the third is to have courage and the confidence in a disciplined way to implement that over time. But that means you have to be open to new ideas and open to new leadership. In the U.S., if you just look at some of the big companies and see the changes that have taken place, Coca-Cola for the last 2 times has had leaders who are not from the U.S. One came from Ireland via South Africa, and the other now is from Turkey. You look at Citibank. He's an Indian American. You look at Avon. She's a Chinese American. You look at Alcoa. He was born in Morocco, grew up in Brazil. The next leader is coming from Siemens. Okay. You look at Pepsi, another Indian example. But the Japanese have plenty of those as well. If you look at Nissan, or you look at Sony, you look at Nippon Flat Glass, where Stuart Chambers has now from Plessy become the CEO of that. You look at SoftBank and Lotte. There are plenty of examples of that. But I think what is more important than ever, whether you're here in the U.S., whether you're in Europe, or whether you're in Japan, is going to be that leadership. And first, it starts with humility. You can't be all things to all people. The second is that vision that you have, and then you have that one culture for Japanese and non-Japanese alike, and work in implementing that vision.